She then went on to say, "This is a public service announcement. I'm available to speak to your company organization event on International Women's Day, Friday, March 8. Why am I available? Because I've had lots of speaking requests for hashtag IWD 2024, but they don't want to pay me, thereby negating the entire point of International Women's Day. This is the experience of many, many women speakers." This is a conversation I want to have at around this time every year. And in actual point of fact, I think it's a conversation we need to have year round. And that is all about women speaking and International Women's Day. First of all, as we open up, I'm going to take you into International Women's Day 2023, because on International Women's Day 2023, I chose to speak for free against everything that I preach. But it was really strategic for a cause that I am passionate about, and it is one of the charities that we actually support. I was speaking for free at an event raising funds for women who are victims of domestic violence. I was up first, and Teresa Reed, the founder of the Forgotten Women Project, was after me. And even though my speaking spot is just 20 minutes, I spent a lot of time pulling this speech together, because when I Googled the UN theme for International Women's Day 2023, I discovered it was cracking the code. Now, in the UN's own words, cracking the code highlights the role that bold, transformative ideas, inclusive technologies, and accessible education can play in combating discrimination and the marginalization of women globally. Now, the resources on the site were extensive, and they revealed some really startling statistics, all research-based, all data-driven, all verifiable. And for example, one of the ones that really got my attention was that as we hurtle into a world dominated by AI language modeling applications, 83% of coders and programmers in that space in the world are men. And no matter how good these men are as a whole, there will be inherent biases. The UN had identified that the greatest risk to the future of women is literally being written out of the algorithms. With so much at stake, I went deep into the research and to finding the stories that would show the risk and the possibilities of the world that was being created right under our feet. But I had to change the opening as I walked into the room, because when I entered that room, all I could see was the slogan, hashtag embrace equality. This was not the UN theme, official theme for International Women's Day. This was a theme being sprouted by a commercial entity who have dominated the Google sphere when it comes to International Women's Day for close to 20 years now. And they have overshadowed at every step the UN's commitment to this day, to the real origins and meaning and advocacy that comes with International Women's Day. And more than that, they openly stated that hashtag embrace equity is a conversation that we can all have. There is no data, there is no research, there is just pithy marketing lines with even pithier photographs of women and men embracing themselves in the name of hashtag embrace equity. Oh, and there's also a link to buy their office morning tea and bunting sets. It's kind of ridiculous. It's also serious, because most of the world does not even realize that this day has been hijacked by commercial business. Let's look at the evolution of International Women's Day, shall we? Because it's not enough just to throw rocks. I want to give you a sense of exactly the origins of International Women's Day and why where I'm going about women speaking is so important. It all started actually in 1910, where in Copenhagen, a woman by the name of Jacqueline proposed the idea of International Women's Day to more than 100 women representing unions, socialist parties, and working women's clubs from across 17 countries. It was the second International Conference of Working Women. Can you imagine in 1910, women gathering from 17 countries into one place? That day, she proposed, International Women's Day would be one for women in every country to press for their demands. And the conference unanimously approved the proposal. This came just 2 years after social resistance in New York saw 15,000 working women march through the city demanding better pay, shorter working hours, and actual voting rights. The protest created the first National Women's Day in the United States. The corporate rebranding of International Women's Day as a time for cupcakes and celebrations by this corporate entity that, trust me, will be ranking #1 on Google again, couldn't actually be further from its revolutionary roots or any meaningful discussion of women's liberation, women's rights, and women's advocacy. When you search for International Women's Day online, as I keep mentioning, your top result does not share the revolutionary beginnings, and it actually completely ignores the fact that International Women's Day was established as an official observance day by the United Nations more than 40 years ago. Now, let's put into context of women speaking on International Women's Day, slammed home by a post by feminist Cindy Gallup on LinkedIn recently, which read, "Don't empower me, pay me." She then went on to say, "This is a public service announcement. I'm available to speak to your company organization event on International Women's Day, Friday, March 8. Why am I available? Because I've had lots of speaking requests for hashtag IWD 2024, but they don't want to pay me, thereby negating the entire point of International Women's Day. This is the experience of many, many women speakers." It's a strong post, isn't it? Well, in my view, it's not strong enough. Because on the one day of the year that is in fact rooted in women being recognized, paid well, and not being exploited, we have evolved it into a day, in actual point of fact in Queensland, Australia, into an entire week of multiple events when women should speak for free. And yes, a lot of women do get paid and do get paid well at these events. But the women who speak for free, that number far outstrips the women who are paid. I read a comment on Cindy's post that said, and I am paraphrasing here, "Raises, not praises, create change." And I could not agree with this more, especially in this over-commercialized reinterpretation and hijacking of International Women's Day, where we've lost the sense of advocacy. We've lost the sense of the work still to be done in the world, where we've lost real data and real insights and real policy and real action coming out of it. And the tragedy of International Women's Day and women speaking for free is that it's often other women trying to sell us into speaking for free. Now, I do understand that the majority of these women are acting under direction or have been given a brief or been given a budget. But the fact of the matter remains that it is often other women trying to sell us into speaking for free. First comes the argument about the awareness factor. Exposure, awareness, being part of something greater than you, people will see you, you never know where it will lead. All of those empty promises that are actually bullshit and go nowhere. Then comes the guilt tripping. This is who already has agreed to do this, with the inference that someone more important than you has already agreed. And seriously, you must be mad if you're not going to do this. And sometimes it goes one step further and we get given the child treatment. Well, if you don't want it, then we'll give it to someone who does. And it's all underwritten by the unspoken but omnipresent message that if you don't do this, you're not with the sisterhood, whatever that is, in a commercialized International Women's Day regime. Number one, the most obvious is, of course, not to speak for free. This is particularly so when it is not a charity or a cause that you strategically support, or when the event is ticketed and or the event is being run by an organization that makes any kind of money. Number two, ask if the women at the event you want to go to are being paid, and check that they are all being paid, right? Number three, if you sponsor or intend to sponsor an event, check that all the women are being paid and not just the headline act. And number four, and really importantly, if you are in an organization that will run their own eternal event, ensure you have budget to pay the women coming in to speak. If the women are internal to your organization, pay them a bonus. If they're good enough for you to put at the front of the room and trust all the rest of the women in your organization to, then they're good enough to be paid for it, however you can make that happen. And the women who you've asked to organize the event on top of their normal jobs, pay them a bonus as well. A cheap bottle of wine and a thank you card simply doesn't cut it. But most importantly, for all of us, remember that this is not what we should be doing just for International Women's Day. This is what we should all be doing every day.